Hi, I'm Gail Mercer-MacKay, founder of the Six Figure Freelance Writer, and welcome to my weekly video blog where I share tips and tricks for your freelance writing career. And this week, I am so happy to let you know that I've been joined by my good friend and editor, Lois Gordon.
Hi, Gail.
Hi, Lois. Thank you so much for joining us today. Lois does pretty much all my editing. She also is a member of our Six Figure Freelance Writer Blueprint community, and she helps a lot of our other writers edit. And she's great, and she's got a lot of ideas for you. It's so important when you are returning copy to a client that you return the best edited version that you can, because that's a real reflection on your talent. And if there's spelling errors, punctuation mistakes, repetition, those kinds of things are not going to show you off in your best light. And often you may not have the luxury of your own editor, so you may have to be self-editing. So here's some things that Lois is going to share for us to watch out for. So Lois, what's your first top tip, biggest mistake you see our community make?
I think the biggest mistake is that writers don't always keep in mind who their audience is. So if they're writing for a Canadian client or a US client, they need to know the difference in spelling, such as skeptical, honor, favor, center, very distinct spellings. And it's important that you have the right spelling for your client, depending on who they're sending their documentation.
And I can attest to the fact that even though you've been editing me for years, I still make that mistake. I still send a blog to Lois to edit, and half of it, the words I spell, I use Canadian spelling, then I use American spelling. And Lois always comes back and said, "Who is the reader here?" And
right.
Sometimes, the reader is a global reader. So if it's a global reader, you really want to go back to the client and find out what spelling do they use for a global audience. A lot of times it is US spelling for a global audience, but sometimes it's not. It could be UK spelling, it could be Canadian spelling. And if you're not sure, you can always go to the client's website and look at how they're spelling some of those words, and that might give you an indication of how they want to be.
Correct.
Yeah, how they want to use it. So that was tip number one. Figure out who the reader is and make sure that you're consistent in the spelling of words, that you're following the same, country of origin for spelling.
That's right.
Tip number two, what would that be?
Punctuation.
Okay.
Commas in particular. And
You're the comma queen.
I am the comma queen. I need a shirt. The United States and Canada have two distinct rules for lists. So, for instance, if somebody's having bacon, eggs, toast, and coffee for breakfast, in the United States, the list would be spelled bacon, comma, eggs, comma, toast, comma, and coffee. In Canada, we would leave out the last comma, so it would be bacon, comma, eggs, comma, toast, and coffee.
Okay, that's great.
And I see that a lot.
Yeah, I do. I know I make that mistake a lot, and I guess I don't pay much attention because I know you're going to correct it for me. But
yes, well, it keeps me gainfully employed.
Yeah. So that's really good. A good tip on when to use commas. The final tip is probably one of my own pet peeves. You and I were talking about it a little bit earlier, but do you want to talk about, kind of the final little tip for writers in self-editing?
I think keeping it tight, that is really important.
Yeah.
There are a lot of run-on sentences where if you delete a lot of unnecessary words, the meaning isn't lost. In fact, it's clearer.
Yeah.
A big thing is ly words or y words, like very. Something isn't very unique. It's either unique or it isn't, and calling it very unique doesn't make it any more unique.
It just clutters.
It
clutters, and it doesn't read as well.
That's right. And ly words, adverbs, modifying adjectives, way too many are used, and they're not necessary.
And sometimes doing a search, I find words like so and just and that and but. If you do a search for them after you finish that first or second draft, you'll see they really stand out. And then wherever you can remove those words, you can just take them out and see that the sentence reads much more tightly. It's much more compressed.
That's right.
Other thing was ing. ING words.
ING words, yes, they're passive. So instead of he was going to the store, he goes to the store.
Okay.
It's very clear, it's more active, and it's more interesting to read. But you bring to mind another good point, and that is starting words with and but, and so. There are always places where that's appropriate, and it's very impactful to start a sentence sometimes with that. But I do find that it's done over and over in the same document. It loses its punch, And technically, it isn't correct to start a sentence with "and."
It is something that's used for shock value almost, or
Yes,
for
it
making an impact. So you would probably only do it once.
Yes.
And if
yeah,
you're gonna do it once, don't do it again.
that's right.
And the other thing that's a real pet peeve of mine is taking a particular word and using it many times in a sentence, many times in a paragraph.
Yes.
So an example in our industry might be solutions. You know,
Oh, yes.
solutions is used a lot. So all of a sudden you read a paragraph and solutions, 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 solutions. So if you do the search for a word in using Microsoft's Word software, it highlights that word in yellow, which is really awesome.
Yes.
That's a feature of Word now. So when you do, if you were to search for example, that word solutions, all of a sudden every instance where you used it jumps out in yellow, and you can see the pattern. You can see, oh my gosh, I've got this everywhere.
That's
So
right.
you
There
want
has
to,
to be
yeah,
another
you
way
want
to
to
say
tighten
it.
it up, use a different way, or reshape the sentence so that you don't have that word in so much. So really watch for repetition of your words. And my final tip, if you don't have Lois Gordon in your corner doing your editing, then take what you've written and read it out loud. Don't read it in your head, read it out loud, because the superfluous words, the words you don't need, will jump out at you. The mistakes that you have will jump out at you. For some reason, reading out loud allows you to edit better than reading in your head.
That's absolutely correct. I've read 350-word books out loud.
Yeah.
It's time consuming, but what a difference it makes to the clean copy at the end of the day.
Yeah, yeah. So, well, thank you for joining us. Really
My
appreciate it. Thank you for joining us. Let me know if you've got any questions you want answered on a future video. We'd be happy to do that for you. And until next time, I'm Gail Mercer-MacKay. Believe, be brave, and go right.